After a while in the labor room, a woman named Mrs. Smash delivers a baby boy that flies out of her womb. One of the doctors quickly runs to catch him, after which he is handed over to his parents. As they're about to take a family photo, everyone in the room is left shocked by the loud fart from the baby, who is named Patrick. This marks the beginning of his frequent farts, and when the family gets home, Patrick keeps up with it to the extent his parents can't sleep well. In the middle of the night, Mrs. Smash tells her husband, Mr. Smash, to go and check on baby Patrick. As he enters the room, the baby farts again, and it's so bad that his father hits the wall and gets injured. Despite coming up with different ways to stop Patrick's farts from smelling around the house, everything backfires, and Mr. Smash is soon taken away in an ambulance in the morning. After he recovers, it doesn't take him a long time before he decides to leave the house due to Patrick's problem. Since his farts are becoming a real problem to the family, his sister Denise, as well as his mom, are not happy with him. When Patrick is now old enough to start attending school, his mom drops him off there, and just as she walks away, she hears when he drops another fart in the classroom. As his farts seem to be never-ending, all his classmates make fun of him, except a boy named Alan, who instantly becomes friends with him. Years later in middle school, Patrick has more than his farts to worry about when he meets a bully named Damon. One day in school, Damon punches him and also makes fun of the kind of food he's eating. Patrick says it's to help him deal with his condition, but the bully still pours it away. When Alan also comes to defend his friend, he gets punched in the face by the bully. After Damon leaves, the two friends start talking, and Alan mentions that he's getting closer to realizing his dream. Patrick asks what he means, and he says he's an inventor. He also mentions that his latest work is to invent a machine that can fly without damaging the Earth's resources. He then shows him a flyer about a competition where he'll be showcasing his invention, so he can win and be recognized as a top inventor. Later that day, while all the students are listening to a man named Sir John singing to them in the hall, the school principal, Miss Rapier, introduces him as the second greatest tenor in the world. After he completes his performance, Rapier tells all the students to stand up while John prays. She tells them not to make any sound until he's through, but just as he starts, Patrick feels the urge to fart. His friend sees this and tells him to hold it in, but even though he tries, he's unable to hold it for long, and his fart interrupts the prayer session. Patrick feels embarrassed by this, and Rapier also disgraces him in front of his peers as she tells him to leave the hall. When he gets home, he feels really sad to see his sister Denise eating proper food while he has to settle for what he doesn't like. After eating, he heads to his room where he starts to think about his dream to be a spaceman. Just as watches the news where they're reporting a rocket launch, he writes a letter to the Space Center asking if his condition could stop him from fulfilling his dream. Just as he's done writing it, a general at the United States Space Center named Ed is asked by a reporter if there's anything specifically that makes up an astronaut. Ed says while there are a lot of things to consider, one thing his men are good at is overcoming their problems. He also adds that his astronauts are uniquely gifted. With this, Patrick tears up his letter, and as he thinks of what to do next, he realizes that Alan can help him. When he gets to Alan's house, the thought of helping Patrick invent something that can stop his frequent farts from smelling or getting loud in public excites Alan. He then proceeds to start working on it, and after a long wait, he shows his friend the invention, which he calls Thunderpants. After Patrick puts it on and farts, he notices that he can't smell anything, and the sound is also very minimal. Just then, Alan shows him how to get rid of the farts stored in the pants by compressing them into a lunchbox connected to it. Patrick is happy with his new pants, and as he gets home, he eats from Denise's food to show her he can now eat anything he wants. The next day, while in school, Patrick is also able to stop his farts from disturbing everyone in the hall when Rapier tells them to be silent. When he leaves the hall, Patrick praises Alan for his brilliant work on the Thunderpants. Suddenly, he remembers what Ed said on TV about being gifted, and he asks his friend if he thinks he's gifted. Alan is quite blunt with him and says Patrick has no gifts. Before he can respond to that, Damon shows up, and in an attempt to bully Patrick again, he snatches the fart box from him, thinking it's his regular lunchbox. Despite being told not to open it, the farts in the box splashes on Damon's face when he opens it. This gets him angry, and he ties up Patrick, after which he tells the other students to beat him. They do this, and also tear his Thunderpants, and as he farts, the smell returns, and the students start calling him names again. The next day, Patrick doesn't go to school, and his friend Alan comes to show him the new Thunderpants. However, Patrick says he doesn't want it anymore. He also says there's no point in going to school again, since he doesn't have any special gifts, and he won't be able to fulfill his dream. Alan asks what he means, and he says he wants to be a spaceman. On hearing this, his friend discourages him, saying it's unlikely he will become one, because he needs to be physically fit and also good with his grades, which are two things Patrick is lacking. He's disappointed to hear his friend say this, and he leaves the room angrily. Alan tries to say sorry, but Patrick is not ready to listen. As he then leaves the house with the Thunderpants, a man named Johnson, who is inside a car, watches him secretly. The next day, Mrs. Smash takes her son to see a doctor to find a solution to his problem. After doing a scan, the doctor realizes that Patrick has two stomachs. As his mom asks what it means, the doctor says it's a very rare condition that has not been seen before, and that makes Patrick a unique individual. He also mentions that what he has is a gift, even though it's useless. Immediately, Patrick hears this. He becomes happy again, as he believes he has found his gift. Later that day, while he's walking around the school, he hears Sir John singing. Suddenly, he farts, and it produces a sound similar to a note John has always struggled with. The singer checks out of his window and sees Patrick, but as he tries to stop him, the boy runs away. As he then comes downstairs to look for him, some of the other people around come over to praise him for how great he sounded. John is about to deny having anything to do with it, but as he realizes it could make him the #1 tenor in the world, he accepts the praise and hopes to see Patrick again. Elsewhere, Patrick goes to meet Alan to inform him about his gift. As he takes a look at the scan results, Alan says the doctor wasn't lying, and the farts could actually be used to power up his flying machine to win the competition. He then finishes up with building the machine, and the next day, they take it to the competition, where John is a special guest. After all the other participants showcase their machines, which were unable to fly, Patrick pumps his fart into Alan's machine, and it becomes the first one to fly. As one of the tubes also gets loose, the sound of the fart gets louder, and John hears the high note again. After their performance, they are chosen as winners, and Alan tells his friend that with his gift, they can build even greater things together. Elsewhere, Johnson is watching everything happen from inside a car, and he soon receives a call where he tells someone that the kids won the competition. Patrick feels excited about how things are going for him, and he decides to finally confront Damon. Despite Damon's attempts to threaten him, he uses his farts to get the bully scared of him. After he leaves there, Patrick heads over to his friend's house, only to see him entering into a black car, which soon leaves town. With this, Patrick goes to Alan's house to ask his father, Michael, about where his son went. Michael shows him a letter from Alan telling him he had to leave because he was needed elsewhere. He also tells his friend to keep chasing his dreams. Patrick asks if Alan will be coming back soon, but Michael says his friend went to another country and he won't be coming back. This leaves him really sad because he doesn't know how else he'll fulfill his dreams without Alan's help. While he's at home, he suddenly hears the doorbell ring, and when he checks, he sees that it's John, who says he wants Patrick to tour the world with him. Since it would mean traveling to different countries, he agrees because he believes it might help him find his friend. Shortly after, John takes him on tour, and during his performances, Patrick uses his fart to help the singer get recognized as the #1 tenor in the world. While John enjoys every bit of it, the former #1, Placido, doesn't look happy about this. A while later, John leaves Patrick in the room to practice for their upcoming performance. As he heads out, Placido soon figures out that John is not the one singing the high note. After seeing Patrick as he's practicing with his farts, he asks him about it, and Patrick confesses to what John has been doing. Because of this, Placido puts a strange liquid into Patrick's bowl of pudding before leaving the room. During the performance, it turns out the liquid is meant to worsen the boy's farts. Just as John expects the high notes from Patrick, his farts get really loud, and the sound breaks several things while also loosening the spotlight next to the stage. Placido soon stands up to make the audience see that John is a fraud, but before he can say much, the spotlight falls on him and he dies instantly. John and Patrick are then arrested, and before he's taken away, the boy says he didn't mean to have a part in the death and that he only joined the tour to find his friend. Just as he is taken into the police van, Alan is watching him from the news, and he tells Johnson, who is there with him, that Patrick is his friend. During the hearing for the death, John, Damon, and Rapier are called to say something about Patrick, but They all say evil things that make the jury pronounce him guilty of deliberately using his fart to loosen the spotlight that killed the tenor. He is sentenced to death by a firing squad, but just before he is killed, Johnson arrives at the scene and tells the warden that the U.S. Special Forces will be taking over the case because Patrick is needed for his abilities. He then rescues the boy and tells him that he'll be taken to where his gifts will be useful. After a short drive, he is taken to the airport where he boards a plane, after which Johnson tells him to rest because there will be a briefing in a couple of hours. Patrick enters his private room, and while he looks around, he sees a picture of his friend and breaks down in tears. Shortly after, Patrick finally meets Alan again, and the two friends are happy to see each other. While Patrick starts talking about how his friend abandoned him, Alan tells him how Johnson had been watching him for a while until he finally called him to join the U.S. Space Center to help them find a solution to bring some astronauts stuck in space back home. He then adds that he thinks his friend's double stomach can help them complete the mission. Patrick asks if it will make him a spaceman, and as Alan says it will, he agrees to help. When the plane lands, the two friends are taken to meet Ed, who welcomes them and says Patrick has just what they're looking for. He also tells the young boy he hopes that after he helps them, he can become a spaceman without wasting a lot of time. He then tells Alan to brief his friend and also prepare him for what to expect. As they enter a secret room, Patrick sees some other kids, and Alan says they're part of his research team. He then tells his friend that the engine of the rescue rocket ship is malfunctioning, and because of that, they had to develop a new model to serve the purpose. He shows Patrick the model they designed and mentions that it looks like his friend's double stomach. Alan then says they'll be putting him into the rocket to help propel it into space to save the astronauts. Patrick sounds excited about this plan, and he continues to think about finishing the mission and becoming a spaceman. A while later, Johnson and Ed see Patrick while he's undergoing physical tests. Johnson complains that the young boy has failed every test they gave him, and he's not so sure how he'll make the mission successful. However, Ed remains optimistic and says Patrick is a gift from God, and they have to use him wisely. The next day, Ed and Johnson are able to see the true power of Patrick's farts during a test, where it is used to power a jetpack. Just before he is taken to the rocket, Ed praises Patrick and also wishes him good luck. Alan also says he's proud of his friend, after which he is then taken away. The report of Patrick's heroic act is shown on TV, and before he heads into the rocket, he also meets the President of the United States, who wishes him good luck as well. Shortly after, Patrick finally gets into the rocket and awaits the time for launch. Back at the Space Center, one of the workers reports to Ed that he just found out that there might be an explosion that blows up the entire rocket. Ed asks how sure he is, and he says his calculations show him that there's a 79% chance it will happen. With this, Ed calls on Alan to inform him. He is shocked to hear the new development, and after a while, Alan tells his friend that the rocket could blow up after liftoff. He also adds that the decision is all on him, and if he wants to leave, he can say the word. However, Patrick says he's going to stay. He asks to speak to everyone in the room, and when he's connected, he tells them that it has always been his dream, and he's not going to back down. He also says that even though he has always disappointed his parents, classmates, and teachers because of his farts, he's happy to finally be doing something that matters. He then gives a piece of advice to those hearing him, saying that if they think they have a problem, they shouldn't see it as that. Instead, they should use it well and use it wisely. Suddenly, Ed and the others in the room salute him, and shortly after, he is asked to fart so the rocket can lift off. After he does this, the Space Center loses communication with him, and as everyone looks sad, Alan hears the high notes that come with his friend's farts. With this, they all realize that he's still alive, and everyone is relieved as they cheer for him. Patrick eventually helps the country save the astronauts, and after they arrive back to Earth, the whole country is happy to have a new hero. Ed also gives a speech to thank Alan and Patrick for what they did. Shortly after, a huge parade is held in Patrick's honor, and as people cheer for him, he waves back at them as he looks happy to have fulfilled his dream.